Recording in progress.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tips and Tricks SIG February edition. I'd like to open up with our typical layout would be open forum, and then we can go into the topics that I had sent out attached to the email that went out. With that being said, who'd like to open up the floor with the first question of the evening? Harry, you were telling us something?
Just making an observation. The chances are that you good folks wouldn't make the mistake that I made, but I've been using PCs since the 80s, and I've had a rule that has helped me just avoid certain problems. If I make changes, to make them one at a time, and if possible, wait 24 hours to make sure that the change was effective in terms of accomplishing its purpose, but also not creating an error in something else or creating a non-operability of other software. And for some reason, about a week and a half ago, I don't know the reason, but I just was impatient and I did 4 or 5 things in succession, not hurriedly, but just one after the other, and then rebooted after all of it. And of course, you know the problem. If something goes wrong, it is impossible, literally impossible, to know which of the things you did created it, or was it something hidden all along that was brewing, and all you did was hasten the problem. So it was quite a production. For 2 days, I had email incoming, but I couldn't send out. Any variation like Firefox, anything that was a Chrome-based browser couldn't connect. And I fortunately had a couple of others that are not Chrome-based, which did allow me to connect, things of that sort. So these were really fundamental utility problems. For all practical purposes, rendering my ability to use the computer just impossible. I understood that I could back up from an image. I understand I had all those options, but I just said I'm going to try just systematically to undo. And of course, sometimes you get lucky. After about 2 days of doing that, I noticed that my firewall had been changed, which was not one of the things that I did by design. Obviously, it was my fault. I did something that created that. It turned out to be Avast, A-V-A-S-T. They're a legitimate company and all that. I want to be careful not to badmouth them or users or their software. In this particular case, I probably didn't realize that it was going to interact with the firewall. Maybe they all do, and I've been lucky all along. But in this case, when I removed it, undid some of that damage, reset the firewall, everything came back, and the sun rose again, and the clouds were pushed away.
Are you still using Avast as your firewall?
Nope.
So
no, it's the Windows. It's the Windows firewall, but changes in the permissions were done through Avast. Maybe I authorized it, do not know.
Okay.
There are add-on firewall extensions to Windows Firewall, which only blocks incoming stuff, not outgoing stuff. And if you get certain malware, you could be sending all your contacts an email that contains a link to malware, and they do the same thing and the same thing. So there are add-ons to the firewall which will block some, not all, outgoing stuff that looks nefarious.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank you.
Okay, who's got the next question for the group? Yes, Dennis. You're muted. Spacebar. See if that does it. There you go.
Something that was mentioned at a previous meeting, I think Tim mentioned it, as part of password security to also do two-factor authentication. I wanted to clarify whether that doing the two-factor is when you're manually keying in your own password, then you should use it, or even if you use a program, which I don't, like LastPass, even then, can you do two-factor authentication?
Two-factor authentication are a number of different ways. One is Windows Hello with your image or a fingerprint. Another one is through using your telephone to get an SMS text message and you type in a verification code.
Right.
But you have to activate the feature for 2FA or MFA. Now, there's also, you can optionally get a verification code by email. Most of these are not that secure methods. Now, the replacement is passkey. Passkey only works on some sites, not all sites as yet. And they generate a private key and a public key, and you get one of the keys, they keep the other one, and so that when you try and log into your account, it will ask for your passkey, and the passkey, if it's saved in a password manager that saves the passkeys, you say yes to that account and it'll give the passkey and you're logged in. Otherwise, and some will still even come back and ask for the password, but some don't. They'll just let you in. But passkeys are not perfect. Nothing is. Some people have situations where the passkey doesn't work anymore. They have to go through the rigmarole of verifying that they are who they say they are, and a new passkey generated for them, and a new one saved.
Okay.
Yeah, the other option that I prefer over all the others, which is to use an authenticator app to get a time-based token. And fortunately, not all websites that use two-factor authentication use the same ones. You may sign up for a half a dozen different websites with two-factor and get different options from all of them.
Yeah, there's no standardization for 2FA, MFA
Okay.
out there. And it's like BIOS. BIOS have no standard either, really.
What app, Drew? What app would you use for that?
I use an open source tool called 2FAS. And it runs on all platforms. It's in the app stores for both Android and Apple. It has a Windows, it has a plugin for your browser. So you can, when your website requests the two-factor code, the browser extension will talk to your cell phone. You'll have to unlock your phone and approve the two-factor, but then it will automatically grab the 6-digit code and fill it in for you.
So if I put in a search for QFA FAS, I get quality, first aid, and safety. I don't think that's
the number 2 FAS.
the number 2. Okay, you didn't tell me that one. You probably did, but we just didn't hear it very well. So this is the site. I think we've pulled this up once before. Yeah, this is 2 FAS token. And you pay for this service, don't you? Or is this free?
It's free.
It's free.
And what I like about it is that it has the ability to Save your information to your Google account so that if you get a new phone or a new tablet and you install the software, it automatically restores all of your two-factor tokens. It also gives you the option to back it up to a file, and you can then copy that information someplace safe so that you have it for safekeepings. I know a lot of seniors that want to give their children permission to log into their bank should anything happen to them. And if they are using a two-factor code with the token, they can do a backup of that file and pass it off to their children, and they can import it into their own two-factor code, so they can get into their parents' bank account.
Thank you, Drew. All right, new question, new direction.
Before you move on, does Bitwarden do something like that, or just password manager?
Bitwarden does 2FA. I think it's a paid option. You have to pay $10 a year, but you can incorporate 2FA into Bitwarden, yes.
Bitwarden works on all platforms, and it also will save passkeys from any website.
Okay, next question, new direction. I see we got somebody else that just chimed in. Harry, do you have something you want to throw by the group? No. Mr. Harry Hines? Well, Dennis, go ahead. I'm sorry, you're muted. I'm sorry, one more time. Harry, you're muted. You were putting your hand up? No. Okay. All right. If we have no more questions, then I guess we could just go into the topics. Oh, Dennis has got one.
I'll just throw this one out. No biggie. Are there programs where you can, does anybody recommend any like free programs, freeware, where you can make your own fonts? Like if I want to take a font and maybe modify somebody's font and make it something that I want, are there programs that I can do that with?
I know there used to be. I don't know if they still exist or not. It used to be a big fad to have a variety of fonts, but people found out that as they created documents, if they used more than 2 or 3 fonts, it became something that most people didn't want to read because it was such a chaotic looking mess. It was kind of like a ransom note that somebody made up of cutting out letters from newspapers and magazines and pasting them on a piece of paper. So they may still exist, but I don't have. I haven't seen anybody talk about making fonts in ages. I mean, that's years, many years.
So I put this into Google, and of course, it came up with boatloads of ways to make fonts. So you need like a font generator. Here's this one called Font Space. And maybe, Dennis, you want to give us an idea what you're looking to do?
Well, am I still muted? No, I'm on. Well, for example, one thing is I know for Braille, there are special machines that that blind people buy, and they can type on them, and it actually types raised characters. on the
Right.
paper.
But
that
that's a
they
that's a
can use.
machine, that does something like that.
Right, right. I was just looking for something where can I'm not looking for raised characters, but is there anything that I could get that would just type, A, B, C, D, the dots, the patterns in Braille, just for a sighted person to read? Just something I was thinking about.
Dennis, I had some Braille fonts that I used on my machines to actually drill the holes to put the dots in.
Hmm.
So there are Braille font generators that are free already out there. Do the search on Braille fonts, and it can go right into. You can install it right into your Windows machine or your Linux machine as a font.
Huh. I'd look for something like that, but it's been 2, 3 years back. I couldn't find anything, but I'll check that now. Okay.
The other thing you have to remember with installing fonts when you're sharing documents is that the font is residing on your own machine. And if you put it in a text document that you're trying to have somebody else use, unless that font is actually installed on their machine, the Windows or Linux or any of the other text programs are going to just use one of the default ones that's closest. That is what Tim was actually referring to. You don't get the real font that you put out. Our industrial designers ran into that. If you're going to create a font and you're going to use it for publishing a document, and you're going to actually print the document and hand it out, it's okay. But if you're going to send that font across the ocean for somebody else to print it, they're not going to have the font unless you include the whole font file with them as a separate font file.
Right.
Right,
And
right.
once you start getting into sending fonts and modifying fonts, you're into copyright territory big time. Just so you know, because
Most
fonts are like overly engineered because of typography. So there's a whole typography society. But to diverge back to, you had asked about seeing the characters in Braille. Here's a grid right here in front of your screen that's showing you each letter of the alphabet and how it would look in print. Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Just to be able to, I mean, that wouldn't be copyrighted as I would see. I'm just putting a bunch of dots on a page.
Well, no, now
Right.
I'll say this. I don't know. I said fonts in general are
Okay.
copyrighted, heavily copyrighted. However, that does not mean that the Braille alphabet is copyrighted. That's a different statement, okay? Because Braille has been out for so long that it probably is in public space, but I don't know this for a fact. Someone could Google it and find out about whether or not this is public domain, but it probably is.
Because of the graphic nature of PDFs, isn't it now standard that it incorporates what it needs from the font library in a PDF?
I would believe so, and all the licensing is handled at the time of the font, at the time it's created.
What Harry said just kind of went over my head. What is that? What did you mean, Harry?
In a PDF, inherently, it's a graphic.
Okay.
I believe years ago, the PDF program that I had been using asked me if I wanted to embed the fonts, and you could say yes or no. If you said no, then what Peter said happens, that the reader at the other end will determine the font that appears to be the closest. But I think nowadays that's no longer a problem. And inherently, it's because the PDF is inherently a graphic format. You're sending a picture of it, you're not sending the actual characters.
That is sort of true, other than if you have a program that modifies the PDF. If it's not embedded in the PDF, is that font, and you've got one of the ones that can modify it, it's going to go to one of the defaults that's on your machine.
You're getting into a little bit of a swamp there with your idea.
Yeah. So what do we got here?
Well, I always wonder why they
Braille
had,
itself, if I pulled it up on Google, is Braille in public domain, and it says here the system of code is not a font and is in public domain. So I think what it is the usage of it is free for all purposes. But the font I think is copyrighted.
Well, it says down below there at the bottom, public domain Braille font, which means
Right.
public domain means anybody can use it.
Yeah, right. But it said there that it's copyrighted, but it's not. It's in public use. That's what Google said. So you want to be a lawyer and read between the lines.
Okay, so there's two things we're talking about here: the dot pattern and the font that's on the hotel signs that is attached to it to print the letters like the room number on the sign. They're both different files, and they're specified directly. I ran into this doing some ADA signs for some room numbers for some hotels with the big machine.
So, Dennis, does that help you?
well, it's something I can look into a little bit if I have any time. I always wondered how people used wingdings and fonts like that. I mean, it never made any sense to me how people could use those or what they used them for. I was just curious.
How do you use wingdings?
Yeah, the wingding font.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are graphic
we can get
characters.
into that in just a moment. Bob?
Okay, what's in chat is what I found about embedding the font in a document, such as a PDF document or a Microsoft Word document. Microsoft Word does have a Braille font, so you can embed. But again, as Sanford says, you got to watch out for those copyright issues.
Yeah, if you're starting to monkey around with, with redesigning a font and then wanting to include and send that off to somebody, across, instead of just looking at it, but sending it around. If you took Times Roman per se, or Arial or something,
Yeah.
And start modifying that, you're infringing in the copyright arena.
Yeah, but in Word you have Braille and you have SimBraille.
Right. I guess we're two different animals. Next question? No. Okay. I had sent out a list of topics and I numbered them. So if anyone would like to pick out one that you'd like us to discuss, just tell me the number and we'll pull it up.
I can speak to number one.
Number one. Speed with Cloudflare. Now, this one, let me just get a shared screen here. And I don't know, is this Cloudflare, it's like a continually running speed test.
Well,
And I don't know if this is different than doing a standard speedtest.net.
Oh no, it is different. I guarantee.
Okay, and this is why I brought this one up. I don't know why.
I had an internal networking problem in my network, and the first thing I used was a command line tool called Trace RT. And Trace RT it gives you 8 lines of communications information. And if 3 asterisks come back, it usually means that site that it's trying to talk to is blocking a response. If you get 1 or 2 asterisks in any of the other lines, it may or may not indicate a problem. But the main thing is it showed up in 2 lines between line number 2 and line number 5.
Hey, hold on. What are you talking about? Is it about this Cloudflare
Just a minute.
or something?
I said up front, I had a home networking problem. I used a command line tool first to give
Right,
me
you were using the Trace
information.
RT and going down the discussion
just a
about
minute.
Trace RT, and I'm on
It
Cloudflare.
dovetailed right into this.
Okay.
I guarantee it. Now, bottom line is, it told me I had an in-house networking problem with that command line tool. It then directed me to this tool here. Go back to the top. Those numbers on the right side, latency and jitter, those numbers that you see there right now are pretty normal, no serious problem. Mine were very large numbers, several hundred millibytes to several thousand millisecond numbers. And because of that, I had to track down in my home network what was causing the problem. I had 5 switches, and it turned out switch number 1 next to the modem router had a problem developing inside. I don't have it with me right now, but there are 5 electrolytic capacitors, and one of them was going bad, and that was
So how
killing.
is this site different than the other speed
You don't
tests?
get
Because it gives you
all
this.
those. You don't get all those numbers and graphs.
Okay.
This is much more detailed than what you will get through regular speedtest.net or OCLA, or however it's enunciated, speed test. So it's a case where this gives you information the other does not give you.
So in this particular case, it's running the speed test and it's telling me, the download speed, and then it'll run the upload speed.
Right, and I was
And the
using the same speed test myself and seeing very low numbers for download and low numbers for the upload speed compared to what I'm paying. Eventually, I took my laptop and connected it directly into the modem router in the back, and I checked my speed test there, and it was perfectly normal.
Which is the correct way of testing your cable modem and out.
Right.
Right.
So that's how I found out I had an internal problem, and I localized it to the very first 8-port unmanned switch as electronic components going bad. I had a replacement, and it worked, and I'm back to normal. So this gives you latency, and the jitter numbers are very important because they can indicate outside your house connection problems. If you have fiber optic, odds are you're not going to see hardly anything worthwhile on that speed test or any of the other speed tests, because it either works or the line was cut, and until it's repaired, you're not going to get anything. In my case, I did have a couple weeks before I found this issue, I had been having some problems, and I found minor issues that I corrected, but it turned out that I didn't find the actual cause. I had a big outage with somebody hitting an important telephone pole and taking it out. Took out electricity and internet at the same time for about 3.5 hours.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Someone else want to pick up a new topic or continue on this one? How about a new topic? Yes, Harry?
Is there interest in number 4? I
Number
never
4.
fully understood that question of privacy and what's real, what's imagined, what's to be expected, and what should not be expected.
Okay. Oh. Doesn't like my ad thing, my ad blockers, I guess.
Welcome to the club.
Welcome to private browsing isn't private, and it never was. Okay. So there's, I guess the article discussed about incognito and privacy modes, that they really are not that well hidden.
So my question really is, do you get anything? Is there ever a time where it makes sense to use it?
Basically, it boils down to this, Harry. The incognito / privacy mode is for nosy busybodies where you are living. And that's not a joke. Because everything that goes through the browser, the ISPs know everything you did, unless you're using a VPN. And even then, your tracks are out there, out on the internet, no matter what. But all the incognito mode does is that when you close it down, it removes any cookies and history information from your computer so that a nosy busybody can't find out what, where you were going and what you were doing when you were working on the computer. And that's all it is. But a lot of people thought it was real privacy. That's what is being displaced. Even a VPN cannot claim that. The only thing that comes close to claiming real privacy is something like Signal that uses end-to-end encryption, and there are other corporate type end-to-end encryptions that businesses use with their employees working from home. But the only other thing is the question mark for WhatsApp. WhatsApp uses some of the Signal type end-to-end encryption, but they are proprietary, so nobody can view the code to make sure that they are in full compliance the way Signal is. And so there's a big hullabaloo going on with WhatsApp as to whether it really is secure, or if employees with WhatsApp have the ability to call tech support and get a switch flipped so they can see the content that's supposed to be private and encrypted. There's a lawsuit on that right now.
Does anyone here practice or try to do private browsing? And if so, what would be the conditions that you would say that would be optimal for wanting to do private browsing?
Well, my feeling is that if you want to do private browsing, use the Tor browser and Tor network.
That's because that's the black web, the dark web.
Well, it's got a lot of competition too.
Not the dark web.
I'm sorry, Jimmy, you were saying?
It's not exclusive to the dark web. It's a portal to the dark web.
Okay.
go anywhere in the world on a Tor browser, and it hops from country to country. Makes it virtually impossible for them to track whatever you're doing back to you.
Tor browser uses the onion routing system, which is like stripping the layers of an onion. It goes from router to router to router to router around the world, and makes it very difficult to trace the route. But there are now a whole bunch of other browsers out there that are competing with Tor itself.
Why don't, if this thing is that great at keeping yourself incognito, why not use this exclusively?
It's slow
Yeah,
compared,
because there's overhead involved in what it does to keep yourself anonymous.
just like a VPN actually slows you down some, and they vary in how much they slow you down VPN to VPN. So it's doing kind of something very similar with a Tor browser and the onion concept.
If you have the Brave browser installed, anyone that does have Brave installed, it has the Tor protocol built into it. So you can open up a private window, or you can open up a private Tor window. So there's two ways to get onto Tor. One is with the actual Tor browser, and one is with Brave.
And I think they just expanded that to a bunch of other browsers from things I'm reading.
But I keep the Tor browser installed on my phone and on my computer. I don't use it very often. But if you were to do like a speedtest.net from the Tor, you would see significantly worse numbers than you would see going through Chrome or Firefox or whatever. But you're sacrificing speed for privacy.
Right.
Thank you, Drew. Yes, Dennis?
I think I missed, if you can do this, and a VPN also has issues with being slow, then why pay for the VPN and not always use this? I think I did not appreciate the difference. I don't understand the difference.
VPN, you got to look at the specs. They vary in what they're doing with your connection that determines how much degradation or latency occurs with your signal going through the VPN. And so you have some VPNs that are very fast, hardly give you any degradation whatsoever. And there are some other ones that are very terrible, that's almost like using the Tor browser itself, going through a bunch of routers. But the thing is, you are connecting to a server. In many cases, it gives you the ability to change your server site, and that part is good. But as soon as you hit that server, your signal goes out on the broad internet, just like it would if you never had the VPN in the first place. But your ISP sees nothing but the DNS request for address decoding. In other words, it looks up the telephone number, so to speak, of the site you're trying to get to. So they would, your ISP would know what site you're trying to get to, but it would not know what transpired at that site.
Yeah, when you're researching VPNs and comparing one product to another, one of the criteria is performance and speed. And you pay for, in that area, different products will work better than others. Nord has good ratings. There are other ones out there. Surfshark has very good ratings. And there's a couple of others that are very, very fast. If you pay, if you buy the wrong product, you get performance. And of course, if you're using a free VPN, then you're going to get even worse performance because of all the people that are sharing it.
Not only that, but you get very few servers you can connect to. And in some cases on the free, you only get one server you can connect to. It's the closest one to you. But they also do logging of everything you do, and they usually sell that information to make the money to pay for the services they're providing.
Yeah, I just highly discourage anyone use a free VPN.
Proton VPN might be the only one to consider using, but you may have a limitation on how much time you have per month.
Yes, the free version has limitations.
Okay. Anyone else want to discuss this? Shall we go on to a new topic?
Number 14.
Number 14. Which was number 14? You're reading my mind. Okay.
I just picked that out of my head because I'm not even looking at the document.
Okay. All right. So those who I don't know if everyone knows what Make MKV is. Make MKV is a recontainerizing software that takes your DVDs or Blu-rays and it will not recode them, but re-encapsulate them into a different format that you can be able to read from most media players. That is, it'll make a file with an MKV extension. It does not change the original format's data layout or how much data is there. So it does not change it from like an H.264 to H.265. It doesn't even re-encode it. DVDs and Blu-rays are visual object binary files. And what it does is it basically takes that binary file and just repackages it into an MKV extension. And then programs like VLC can easily play this. Now, that's the technical aspect. The reason for doing this is you have a whole big library collection of DVDs, but you can't take them with you when you're traveling or you want to watch them at home. You want to put them on the computer so you can watch them from anywhere in the household. You want to put it on your tablet or something like that. You own these DVDs. You have the legal right to make a copy of it and put it onto and use it for personal usage. MKV facilitates that. The way I used to do it is I used to use a DVD decryptor, and then I would do something like Handbrake to convert the files to something else that's usable, to make like an MPEGs or something. But there was a lot of steps and it took a lot of time. MKV is really quick because it's not grinding through the data. It's just repackaging it. So the way this program works is you hook up a DVD or a Blu-ray player up to your laptop. You download the program called Make MKV. MKV is free while it's in beta. It's been in beta for the last 20 years or 15, 20 years, so it's free. It does have an expiration, and sometimes you have to re-download it to make it work, or you can buy the key, but it's free to use. So, anyone got any question on it before I illustrate the software? No.
Yeah, I use it all the time. Well, not the product, but the files.
Right. Me too. I use the product. Hopefully this is showing up here. You guys are seeing this. It looks like a DVD player in the middle. Is that a yes? Okay. All right. So when you start the program, you have this DVD player. When you stick a disc in, you just click on this, and what it'll do is it will start to read, hopefully. Ah, yes. Great. I don't know what that was saying. But it'll read the structural layout of the file that's on the disk. What in the world is it doing? Oh, direct disk access. Sorry, I don't know. It must have a problem with this file, so I'll quit this. No, wait, maybe not. Anyways, it's going to read the file, get the structural layout, and then when it's done, it will tell you how many chapters, and it will decode all these or repackage all these files and put them onto your hard drive. So this particular one, I could tell it to put it onto my Windows machine, my desktop. Maybe I'll just put it on the desktop. Make folder. So let me select the folder here. Output. And then you just click over here where it says make MKV, and it's doing it.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long this will take. It'll give me an idea. The advantage of this is if you have a good size collection or any collection of DVDs or Blu-rays, the fact that it works with Blu-rays is important here too. So it cracks the key, it creates the file, and then you can be able to watch it. If the movie that you're make NKV and running the program on, if it has multiple camera angles available, it will give you those as subfiles, so you could watch it from a different angle or something like that. Pete?
Yeah, is this a purely Windows or is it also Linux?
I don't know. I don't know. I think you could probably look it up while I'm trying to do this. Bob?
Does this program remove DRM and copy protection?
I believe it does, but you'll have to read into it. Again, this is for your own personal use. So you can do that. And now let's not get into the legality aspects of this. I'm sure it's been torn apart by all the lawyers that are out there, but this has been around for a long time. Dennis?
So two questions. One, does the file it creates much bigger than the original? And two, if you put it on a USB stick, is that something you could plug in and play on your TV or something like that?
The answer is yes, you can. You can get, well, depending upon the TV that you have, they come with a video player that can play MKVs. My TV happens to be an Android TV, so I have VLC media player on my TV, and I can plug a USB stick in and with an MKV file on it and play it just fine. What I typically do instead is I leave all the MKVs on my computer, and I have VLC attached to my computer and play them from there.
So your other question was, is the file bigger or smaller? It is the same.
Same size.
It's the same size as what's on the DVD or Blu-ray. Mind you, DVDs and Blu-rays are big. They hold a lot of data. So a DVD can have like over 4.7 gigabytes of data on there. So your files are going to be at least that big. It's not repackaging them and making them smaller. That would be Handbrake that would do that. If you want to make them more portable But this is taking the original file format, so you're not going to lose any frames, any data, nothing. But it puts it into a format that you can play on other devices, because a DVD by itself can only be played in a DVD player or something like VLC that knows how to interpret and read VOB files that are on a DVD. I hope that helps. Oh, Bob, you got your hand up.
I was just going to mention that VLC Player has a plugin for Blu-ray that does allow most Blu-ray discs to be played directly through VLC.
Right. Okay. MKV is still running right here. You can see the files are getting pretty big, which it will be. And I could check back into this later on. So if you, like I said, if you have a collection of DVDs and you want to make them, you want to be able to watch them anywhere at any point, this is a good way of doing it. Because if they're sitting on a shelf collecting dust, you're not utilizing something you paid money for.
And a lot of people take their collections now and put them on a media server like a Jellyfin.
Right. Which is what I was doing a long time ago. I was taking my DVDs and I would just, I would run DVD decryptor and copy the original format of the DVD to my hard drive. Well, to my server's hard drives. But the problem is playing them back. VLC is one of the few programs that will actually play a DVD in its native format. But now that I put them in MKV, I can easily make them portable and play on most devices. Great topic. Does anyone here rip their movies? Besides Drew and me? No. Hard drive space was cheap. Was cheap. And if you had a lot of it, you can fill it up.
Very fast.
Very fast.
Especially if you got a lot of Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm. Especially Blu-rays. Blu-rays do take up a lot of space on hard drives. They can be pretty big, especially if you have something like Avatar that's got multiple viewing angles that they'll put on it that when you're watching it, you know, and then so each one can be repackaged several times because it's got different views. So you could have, you know, 5 gigabytes for each file or more. We'll see how much this files come out to when they're done.
Yeah, I have movies that are 25 and 30 gigabytes long.
Yeah, especially when you get into the big movies, you know, even James Bond movies, 007 or something. Those are big inclusive files. And the best part is when you're doing it with this program, you're not losing any data. You're getting the full content there. You're not degrading it as everybody else does. If you watch it streaming, it's degraded. Unless you're paying for 4K. Good one, Drew. Shall we talk? So that was it.
I picked number 14 because I thought it was going to be off your list and you were going to say what were you referring to?
Yes, Harry.
You don't have to play the one about the speeding up file transfers, which I would like to recommend to anybody that is interested. They are pretty much common sense suggestions. So I was thrilled when I read it and I said, oh, I do most of those.
Okay. Well, let's see what that has to say. Uh, file transfers. Well, we all know about SSDs over HDDs.
Well, when they say file transfers, are they referring to storage media attached to the computer, or are they talking about over your local network?
I don't know the answer to your question.
Huge difference.
Well, this one's talking about storage devices through USB 3.0, so that would be an interface that's going to limit your speeds. What are they saying here?
Okay. My house is like converted to 2.5 gigabit.
Well, USB 3 is 5 gigabits.
No, I'm talking about on my network, computer to computer.
Okay, yeah, that's
Okay,
different.
yeah. That, I don't know why they bothered using NTFS for over FAT32. Well, okay. Like Harry was saying, a lot of this stuff is pretty, common sense. You talk about converting it from to NTFS. It's a good thing to do if you're not done. I don't know anyone here. Probably most everyone's running NTFS. Robocopy.
Robocopy is a good program, although it can be difficult to use because it's a command line utility, and you've got to put a lot of switches and things in. I use an open source utility called FastCopy, and it does a wonderful job.
Disable real-time antivirus scanning. I would not do that. I don't, if you're really noticing a slowdown in your system because you're using antivirus. Oh. Anyone else want to comment on that subject thought?
It depends on if you've already scrubbed the original source, you shouldn't have to have the real-time antivirus running while you're transferring it to another media. If the other media's got a virus in it already, there's nothing you can do about that unless it's caught by the real-time AV. But you should be checking out your source and target drives.
Drew, you're on to the right thing. What really is hindering or, slowing down your network speeds? And we kind of touched on that earlier when we were talking about, rooting out your switches, like Tim was saying. And maybe starting with connecting directly to your cable modem, so you check the speed at your output through the internet, and is your cable modem performing correctly? And then you got to root down each one of the individual interfaces and see is it a cable that's slowing it down?
Yeah, I used to have an old router, and it was I was paying for faster internet speed, and I wasn't getting the throughput that I wanted. And by swapping out my little $50 router for a $100 router or $150 router, my performance went way up. So if you have a 15, 20-year-old router in your house, you might want to upgrade it.
Oh, that definitely is a good idea to do.
Well, it's also a case where when you get into old computers, and I mean real old, you have 10 megabit per second connection, which is you go to sleep while it's trying to transfer. Then you have 100 megabits per second, which is called fast internet. And then you have gigabit at 1 gigahertz speeds. And a lot of the infrastructure can handle 2.5, you don't get the full 2.5 gigahertz capability without possibly having to replace all your in-house Ethernet. And it only applies to Ethernet that we're talking about here. This does not affect Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is strictly radio transceivers in your routers and access points.
Right, and those are affected by, as we all know, by so many different conditions, whether it's the construction of the home, where things are, how far away they are, atmospheric conditions. Did you pay your maid to come and clean your house today? Is the dog asleep? That all affects your.
And don't forget
internet
the
speed.
cats and the static electricity they bring.
Yeah, that's right. The cat walking by and zap, there it goes. I'm going to change subjects here just briefly and circle back to make NKV, and the program is done. You see it did 6 files. I will close the program, and the ones that it did, it does them in order. Hopefully you're seeing this folder okay. And the size of the folders, the biggest one, which must be the movie, is 3.9 gigs. And then all the other ones are much smaller. So these could be, I'm not going to play them, but they could be ads for other movies to come out. This is all part of that movie. So it could be some of the screens or background. It could be extras that they'll put on here. So you get to watch the extras. You're done watching them, you delete them. How many times you need to watch an extra? But you got this one file here, this MKV, and again, I can't play it because I'll do copyright problems. But this would open up immediately in VLC with no problem. And that was MKV, make MKV. Bob.
Are we up to the next topic?
You betcha, sir.
I think many people are not aware of number 8, ACR, on your smart TV, and how it controls how that TV is monitoring what you're doing.
Yeah, I've seen lots of news articles about turning that off.
Okay. Yes. Specifically, a lot happens on it. I think on was it the Samsung or the LGs? They like to collect a lot of data.
LG WebOS.
WebOS, that's right. So I guess I could ask, does most everyone here have a smart TV?
Here. I have the old style that's about 20 years old now. It's a smart TV, but it has no cameras to it, no ACR, etc.
Okay, well, you don't qualify.
No, I actually qualify for safety.
Well, yeah, I meant that with safety. But if you bought a new TV today, that's not going to be the condition.
That's
finding
true.
a not smart TV is harder than finding a smart TV. But they have a lot of what is this ACR? What do they call this?
It actually consists of something like 4, maybe 5 different parts. And they have to do with the same kind of advertising IDs that you would find in companies like Google.
Right.
And there's about 3 or 4 different places you have to go in the settings to find them and turn them off if you wish.
Now, mind you, if you don't have a smart TV, but you have a cable box, your cable box is doing the same thing, because it's tracking everything you do and sending it back to the cable company. Dennis?
ACR, automatic content recognition.
Okay.
And I did buy an LG TV that has this web OS like 6, 8 months ago. So I'm interested in this one.
Okay. So you got to go in the settings section, general. It tells you here to turn off Live Plus. Let's see. In the additional settings, select advertisement, toggle on the limit AD tracking option.
Now, this may appear a little differently in more up-to-date versions of WebOS.
That is absolutely correct. What they state here is only at the time of the writing that this was composed and the screens that were available at that time.
Yeah.
And all these software people are notorious for, once it's been put out there in the web, they rewrite it and they make
Yeah.
it harder for you to find it.
It was a little harder to find on mine, but not that hard. And note that it will vary by brand of TV because they use different systems.
They talk about Sony TVs, and they give you, although I don't know many people are buying Sony TVs these days. They tell you how to make the changes there. Hisense. Now this is a big brand that's out there. I personally do own a Hisense TV.
Yeah. And again, these are different operating systems.
Right. Hisense is using the Google TV. This one, they were also talking about the Roku interface. So the one I have has Google on there, but I'm sure there's the Google Home app.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe that Roku might have been a link to another article.
Okay.
Roku TV is a whole different.
Oh, right. Also, is your Roku TV spying at you? I thank you for that clarification.
But there it is down here. There it is down here, TCL.
Right. TCL is another good brand, that's out there. But I would recommend, if you have a smart TV, that you go in and follow these settings, recommendations for settings, and make these changes here for turning off or on these settings for privacy. And you also should probably go in and do this once a year.
Or maybe more often than that, because you get software updates quite frequently.
Oh yeah. And notoriously, they will reset those parameters to their liking when they do a software update.
Just like
And then you have to go
Microsoft.
through it and change it again.
Just like
There
Microsoft.
was. Go ahead, Tim.
It's that was a habit of Microsoft, and it took them a long time to figure out what they wanted versus what the people wanted. Just didn't work out, so they stopped doing it for the most part. But they've now using. They were starting to use AI to take its place.
Yeah, that's a whole different world.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is also there's a problem. I think Ed Keating noticed this, that his WebOS TV was scanning, contacting the internet about every 30 seconds, trying to find updates. And he was able to find this out through his home monitoring equipment. So I don't know if you can control that.
It wouldn't surprise me that there's a way of dealing with it to try and stop it.
Oh, I know how I did it. I unchecked automatic updates, and I now check for updates whenever, like maybe once a week, once a month. That's about all you get. So you can do manual updates.
You're talking on your TV?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that the OS isn't constantly checking every 30 seconds, because that's their default.
Okay. It's also a good idea if your TV is connected to over-the-air broadcast that you rescan the channels every 6 to 8 months, something like that, because they're always doing updates on their antennas and pushing new signal through.
That's also true with ATSC 3 versus ATSC 1.0.
Right. Right.
NBC was one of them in our area. Their primary went to version 3, but if you rescan, there is a 1 version still broadcasting, but the antenna, I don't know if it's location for me or it's always the wind direction and speed that causes a lot of pixelation, drop out of voice, even the whole video signal.
Do you have an amplifier on your antenna?
Yes.
Try a second one.
Really?
Yep. Give it a whirl. Put 2 of them on there. Where I'm at, I put my antenna came with an amplifier, and then I went to Menards and picked up an RCA one, just a cheap one that they've got, and I plugged that one in there, and I double amplify it, and now I got signal, no problem.
Really?
Pretty much, I'm getting about 95% of the signal come through.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, and I've been doing that for a decade plus.
But there's going to be more of the ATS C3 going on at Fox. Might be the next one because both Fox and NBC are now sharing this lousy antenna that's still broadcasting with ATSC 1, normal signal. And
Right.
I think Fox will eventually have the 3 standard just like NBC does on the main channel.
The nice thing about the new next gen signal that's coming out is I believe it's 4K. I believe. It also has Dolby Atmos, and you can replay from the top of the hour or back an hour of playing on that. So you have digital capabilities of rewinding the show.
Well, there's another thing too, is the DRM.
Right.
And the FCC is getting one big earful of outrage on the DRM. Not a joke. I follow a lot of this through stuff I peruse through.
Yeah, the trouble there is right now the DRM is so tightly regulated that no manufacturer has been able to put out an independent recorder for playback. And I don't know if the cable companies allow next gen recording and playback on their systems.
Well, there are some that I've read or viewed on video that they're actually complaining about DRM in total. They don't want the DRM in the broadcast spectrum. Streaming or something like that, fine. If they have DRM, they have DRM. But for open air broadcasting, there's a lot of pushback on having the DRM as part of the standard. And it's not just the DVR functionality. There is a real monopoly going on trying to control exactly what is allowed and what is not allowed. There are some manufacturers that have a perfectly capable DVR operation, but they cannot get it licensed because of this monopoly like structure that's going on.
Yeah, I specifically the technical detail is this. The DRM has to be in the hardware, and it cannot be handled by firmware. So it has to be baked in at the factory, and then the broadcasters keep changing the DRM.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this?
Well, if you are watching over the air, you don't have the ability to record, right?
Well,
Yes,
you used
can.
to, but not
It
anymore.
depends what your device is, if your device is capable of doing it.
Like a TiVo.
My smart TV has capability of doing the same.
TiVo is another one that used to be able to do it, but now I don't know if they can do it with the ATSC3 with DRM.
The manufacturers that gave up were TiVo, Tableau, and Silicon Dust.
Right. They gave up on creating a 3.0, an ATC3 or next gen tuners. They have the first version, 1.1, which
1.0.
is,
1.0.
720p. Silicon Dust, I have 2 of those units, and I also have a Tableau, what I've never fired up. And it just so happens a neighbor of mine was just bragging about his 2-tuner Tableau that he just put in a month or so ago. So they're still rocking them. And those are over-the-air tuner recorders, or the tuners that allow you to do recording. The Tableau, I think, handles it.
It handles ATSC 1.0, not 3.0.
Right.
Also, I think TiVo is selling out to Channel Master.
Yeah, there's a lot of consolidation going on. A lot of cable stations, especially rural areas, they're either going out of business or they're being bought up by others. And it's a real shrinking market that you get to choose from. And it's also cable TV is just about dead in all markets. And it's a case where you literally have to do various subscriptions. Now, YouTube just came out recently with 6 new packages that are cost less than the normal full viewing package. So that if you don't want sports, there are at least a couple lower end packages that will give you a lot of the TV movie content and some local content as well without the sports. But the sports is one of the big sellers in today's market for TV viewing. And that's because of all the sports betting that's going on.
Well, it's not sports betting that just doing that, but because there's a lot of people that like sports in our country.
That's true, but a lot of them are doing betting one way or another, and it's feeding that. They're feeding each other, is what's going on. And so the more betting there is, the more people want to view the TV sports entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of consolidation in that industry, and I think Disney now controls the ESPN for the most part. But part of, I think it's the AFC or NFC, one of the two, bought 10% into ESPN Not that they're saying they're not going to just let ESPN dictate what the cost is going to be. They're going to have to negotiate, but they have their foot in the door.
Okay, anyone else want to comment about over-the-air tuners, TVs? Bob, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say one thing. There are prediction markets for practically everything.
Right.
And some of those prediction markets market themselves as though they were like the commodities markets.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of people to ask here, but I was curious who is using an over-the-air tuner besides myself, Tim?
I use some.
No?
I use a lot of streaming.
Pete, can you use one in Hawaii? Do they have a over-the-air broadcast TV?
I'm not for sure.
I would think they would. You're one island, they only have to put it up high and that's it, gets everybody.
Not with the metal on this island. All the soil is iron.
Okay, well, that's the soil. You don't put a TV below ground.
You can.
Yeah, I guess you could.
Too far.
You know, to get up that high to see everything, you've got mountains in the way anyway.
Let's see.
They have a lot of antennas, but you can't get them everywhere.
That's very true.
Yes, there's broadcast TV in Maui. Several TV stations. Come on, you don't know this? There's a PBS, KMEB.
I don't have a TV. I've got monitors on the computer.
Okay, I guess.
The tricky part is their market is kind of like the Boston market. If you've got a hill in the way, you've got a problem. And our hills have a lot of iron in them too.
Well,
Yes, they do.
that's why there's a lot of ham operators, especially in the West, that they may live somewhere in the valley per se, and they will build a shed near the top of a mountain to have a ham shack with their equipment, antennas, etc., to be able to do their communications. And a lot of that's being automated by computers for decades now. So that's a case where they're taking the risk of putting the equipment up there and possibly somebody either vandalizing it or stealing it.
Okay, we're off
Well,
topic.
our soil
We're
is
off topic.
so
Let's
iron rich.
kind of
you
go
can
back
take
to
a
top.
magnet
Pete?
over the top of it.
I'm sorry, Pete?
Our soil is so iron rich, you can take a magnet over it and it will pick up pieces.
That's funny. All right, shall we go into a new topic for my list?
Don't all chat at once.
I know. Okay, the very last thing, I don't think it's on mine. We brought this up, or this was brought up at the Keeping Up with Tech meeting in the beginning of this month, and there are those who may not have attended that one. There was a discussion about WordPad that is gone in Windows 11, but you can get it back by going to this particular site, win7games.com. Drew, I think you were the one who apprised us of this one, did you not?
Yes.
And so if you miss WordPad, you can download it, 32-bit or 64-bit, and reinstall it in your Windows setting. They got old calculators. Lots of goodies. What else they got on this side?
It's become a cottage industry for the classic versions of calculator, notepad, paint, etc., that don't have Copilot.
Okay.
And some in even in Notepad, the reason there it's not only Copilot, but there's a lot of pushback by a lot of people. They don't like the tabbed capability that's in the current Notepad.
Okay. It looks like, so can download calculator, classic notepad. So you can get the classic versions instead of, sticky notes too. So there's a lot of stuff on this site. This is win7games.com. I'll put the link in the chat. Ooh. Terry
No,
coming.
Terry Moy.
Yay. And that just bumped us up. Okay. That was fun. So next question, do we have not question, but do we have any more topics anyone would like to talk about that were in my thing? Wait. Dennis says number 3. Either that or else he's trying to pour us a drink and he's showing us how much booze that we're supposed to pour in that drink, right?
Yeah, 3 fingers.
3 fingers? Okay. Oh, man, another one of these. Everyone needs to know these essential Windows Task Manager tricks. I always wonder about these. I think we cover them a lot of times, but let's see. So I know that when you're running Task Manager, you can do the sortation by the processes, by the CPU usage, by memory. You can also use it to spy any app or things that are giving you problems before it says spot trouble before it spreads. This one I don't get. Does it spread like places, like a virus?
Could be.
Could be.
There are processes that spawn other processes.
Okay.
You have a real problem with that.
Restart Windows Explorer to fix temporary issues. Now, that I've never tried to restart. I have tried to stop it when it hangs up on something, but I never tried to restart. Has anyone used that function before?
I have had machines where it just simply throws solid on something.
Yeah.
And yes, sometimes you just restart it and you don't lose all of your work.
Right.
If you're working on other applications.
Right.
It's something that I've rarely but occasionally have had to use.
Now it's saying here, like you could set priority for apps.
Yes. Be careful.
Why would you need to do this?
Because a process that you're working in right now, you want a higher priority because something else is gobbling up either the CPU, memory, or other things like that. You got to be real cautious with that one. You can also take a process that is taking up too much and you can lower its priority and that'll slow it down because you can get processes that are like a runaway train and they'll just eat up all your resources and you can't get anything done.
Lots of good stuff here.
Now, inside of some applications, like my backup program, Macro Reflect, you can set the priority. And that will help you get either faster backups or get better use out of your system while you're doing backups.
Yeah, but boy, it would be nice if more applications like that had that feature, because one of the biggest drawbacks to people not backing their systems up is the amount of time it takes. Well, if you can dedicate the time and give it high priority and get it done quicker, why not?
On several of my systems, I can get it done in about 10 minutes, and they're full installs.
That's what I'm getting at. Depending on the horsepower and capability of your machine, you can cut your time down quite a bit by changing priority. But it's usually not in the application. You have to usually go to the task manager that's controlling your computer and find the application process and set it there. But like I said,
Yeah.
you got to be extra careful what you're doing, know what the possible bad things that can happen.
So other things that are in here is you can filter through and see how much your CPU is being used, memory, all the way on down to your GPU.
Yes.
I've not noticed this one before.
Newer machines, like about 6th or 7th gen Intel systems, the video onboard processor is now classified an iGPU.
This looks like your startup apps.
Yep.
Your who you are.
From the startup apps section, if you see something in the startup apps that you don't want to start at the beginning, just because it's checking to see if there's a new version of the program available, and give you an ad there to try and get you to download it right away, or it's installing, like Edge. Edge will install 80% of its program in your RAM, taking up that RAM space for its own use, and you see nothing of the browser until you actually click on it. Then it adds the other 20%, and you see your browser and can use it. That's why I turn a feature off in Edge browser, Chrome browser, and a whole bunch of other browsers, not to leave the browser program in memory, so I can use other that RAM memory that it would tie up for other applications. Otherwise, you're going to have to be using your page file. In Linux, it's called a swap file, an awful lot, moving stuff out of the way so you can run other programs.
Services. Okay. That was Task Manager.
How about number 10?
Number 10. Taming. This is often a topic that we bring up. Taming the Windows side-by-side folder.
Well, I've been cleaning that out for years now, and sometimes it's as much as 25 gigabytes.
Right.
Dead wood.
All right. So, would somebody like to just explain what is the Windows SXS folder?
It's the functional modules of Windows, and allows your system to run, and it has at least one or more prior versions after an update. The bad part is there's no mechanism that the general public uses to get rid of the dead wood, because the Windows system itself will not get rid of that dead wood. And I have had times where I gained back gigabytes up to 25. I think there was one instance I gained 30 gigabytes of space in storage back, just getting rid of dead wood.
So let's go to my Windows folder. And try to see if I can pull that up.
You gotta scroll down a little bit, I think.
So there's the folder, WinSSX, and I'll do a right click, properties, and we'll see how big my folder is. And I do try to clean this. So mine should be at least around 15.
It's a fair size folder.
Yes, yeah, it is.
It's critical to the Windows operating system, but
there it is, 15.3 gigs.
every time you get a update for Windows, it's replacing some of the files in that folder and leaving the old one to allow you the ability to roll back your to the previous version you had if something isn't working right. But it keeps accumulating those old versions until you do a specific action to clean out the garbage.
Now, in that article, if I bring that back up, I should. They do discuss about using PowerShell command line
Yes,
to help analyze or clean up that file.
that's right. It's the one.
And it's going to analyze it against the component store.
Right. It's a component store is kind of like a manifest of what the current operating system should have and be using. Anything that's not on the manifest is
Right.
probably old dead wood.
As a word of warning to anybody who's doesn't know, don't just go in and start deleting anything in that folder.
That's right, or you're going to have a dead
Just
system.
don't go arbitrarily and go, I'm going to delete the content in this folder. That's dangerous.
You'll have a inoperable system. So if you want a non-bootable system, be my guest. There's lots of ways of getting that without having to go in and delete content of that folder.
So it is a good idea to follow some of the steps that are in here that are laid out in this article to help you get a handle or wrangle in that folder to help wean it down a bit. And if you can get 10% or 20% off of it, you're doing great. You recovered that room. So, they give you the commands here. They walk you through them. They tell you which ones are dangerous or not. I follow these commands.
Now, there is one thing. You don't have to run this frequently. It's just the opposite. It's infrequent. Maybe every 3-4 months. No, maximum would be once every 6 months.
Right.
Because this stuff does not accumulate that fast. Usually, when you get a big lump sum like I have, these are systems that have been running for years without it being cleaned up. And then when you finally do the cleanup, surprise, you got massive amounts of storage.
Right. So one of the places, for those who don't know, have never played around and trying to clean this section up of their computer, the first place you can start to safely clean up this folder is to go to your C drive, pull up properties, which is this screen right here. And it's going to have, it should have a disk cleanup. Where's disk cleanup? Huh,
No, it did disk cleanup.
there is no disk cleanup.
I think they did something, and I can't remember.
Where did they put it?
There is. It's in Sense.
Or is it in-
It's in Sense here.
Is it in here in storage
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay, my bad. I was trying to illustrate the normal way of doing it, but since the wonderful world of Microsoft and their wonderful updates that they completely love to throw down at us, they changed the whole script. I don't know where it is. You say it's in here in storage sense, right?
You can use the old version if you want to that you were trying to do, but you have to do a Windows key plus an R to bring up a run box, and you type in clean mgr and hit enter.
Windows key, the letter R, and then I'm going to type what? Clean?
Clean mgr, one word.
MBR?
M as in Mary, G as in George, R as in Ralph.
Clean MGR. Well, it didn't do anything. Unless it does it and you don't see it.
Well,
Oh, there it is.
there it is. It takes a while to come up. Now, this is the low level at this point here. If you go to the button down the bottom left, that does the administrator type level cleanup that includes this light cleanup. And it takes longer to get done because it does another analysis of your drive to
Right.
get that. And then it takes longer to have the cleanup actually execute.
Now, that was the screen that I was trying to illustrate a short while ago.
Right.
So,
It's
It
still
came,
there.
it came up behind your File Explorer.
thank you. Let's see, where is this?
It's just behind your File Explorer.
Yeah. It's behind your, probably behind the browser.
Yeah, it's behind that guy.
There it is.
It's
So if and I did that enhanced disk cleanup, and it's going to be able to pull out a gigabyte off of that.
well, you look through there because sometimes there's stuff. You got several different blocks there. The top one says recycle bin. And it has something in it, but it's not checked off.
Correct.
You would have to look and say, "Oh, I want those taken off as well," and it
Right.
increases the amount of recaptured storage.
So let's kind of walk through some of this stuff here, these titles here. So we got the Windows Update Cleanup.
Yes,
Where does that come from?
that comes from the Windows updating system, and especially if you have a feature turned on that downloads a lot of the updates to your system to share with your other computers that almost nobody knows about, let alone how to share it with your other computers. So the end result is it's taking up space and giving you nothing back.
And then Windows Defender Antivirus.
Yes.
What is that when it updates new definitions? This is the old ones?
Well, you have the old files of what is been added to the database. So these are files that take the content, put it into a database, and they leave the file behind.
Okay. Some of this is self-explanatory.
When you do an upgrade, one of those out there will be old Windows from the upgrade. This is how you remove it properly and totally. If you do it the manual way, which some people do out of ignorance, I'm sorry to say, then they leave some portions left behind, constantly taking up space they could have gotten back doing it the proper way.
Is this safe for the average person to do?
Yes, the bad part is Microsoft doesn't explain it well, and they don't. They scatter the stuff all over the place. The newest device or a piece of software, I'll say, that brings this old tool and other tools together is PC Manager in the Windows Software Store. You download it, it has a ton of features that are scattered throughout the entire realm of Windows on that machine, that they are now with Windows 10 and 11 moving all over the place from the control panel to other locations. It's crazy.
And I have noticed in PC Manager, you do have many of the same categories. They're organized a little differently, but you can get them to show up. They're not checked off by default, so you can go through them.
That's right. PC Manager just takes all these archaic tools. Many of them are in the Windows Systems 32 folder, going as far back as Windows 3. That's a little while ago, like the early 1990s. And most people never knew the tools were there. They didn't know how to use the tools or why they would use the tools, etc. And Microsoft didn't explain worth a nickel. And most other content creators since YouTube have not explained most of those tools. There are
So
some.
is this under this deep cleanup?
Yep.
So that will do the same thing as what we were just doing?
Yep.
If you hit that button, it'll just scan and it'll show you what there is.
All right.
And you
Now,
can
luckily,
add,
I did tell the system to go ahead and clean up that files so it won't come up with those same amounts.
and this thing will do tremendous things. On top of it, on the home button, there is for a person like myself, things that I do with lots of articles and videos and that is it'll get rid of stuff in memory that is no longer being used. Calls it a memory boost. And it's the only time I use it is on when I'm doing my research. But
And PC Manager is built into Windows, is it not?
no, it's an add-on, just like Power Toys. And WinToys is another tool that's created by Microsoft employees that bring a lot of archaic things together and give you access to them so that they're easier to use and understand. And that's in Microsoft Store as well, along with Power Toys. So you have Power Toys, WinToys, PC Manager. These are all stuff that have been created within the last couple years. And they're constantly evolving and pulling in more new stuff, new features, making refinements, fixes to old applications that were neglected.
Thank you. Okay, we got time for one more subject. Anybody?
Oh, number 6.
Number 6.
Now, here's one where you really have to be careful.
Yep. Otherwise, you
All right.
cut your nose off to spite your face.
Well, maybe we should be talking about this one.
Well, it's got to be known because there's a real reason for bringing the article up.
Windows installer Oh, it is a folder called Windows Installer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a misunderstood. What it actually does, oh, look, it's got a lot of cool files in there.
Yes, but
The cache created by Windows Installer. Isn't this part of that side-by-side stuff?
yes, it's a side effect of side by side. It's the gives you some of the ability. Again, an update comes in and something goes badly wrong. This gives you a ability to roll back. And if you eliminate the stuff, and there's a lot of people who are short of space and it slows their whole computer down, they're looking for anything they think they can get rid of that because they don't know what it is. They just delete it. And if the system keeps working, they don't care. If the system doesn't work, they know they goofed. That's a hard way of learning things.
All right, so this one folder looks like installer patch caches. I guess you can clean that one up.
Well, every program you install has an uninstaller, okay? Well, theoretically, you can eliminate the uninstaller portion of any application, but it makes it harder to uninstall the whole application cleanly. The best thing you can do there is use Revo uninstaller or Geek uninstaller in that particular instance. But you're also not going to gain that much from it. But unless you are a person who is constantly downloading and installing things to see what they're like, and if you don't like them, you get rid of them, well, you have tons and tons of stuff accumulating in your storage on your system. And if you don't do cleanup the right way, that just keeps expanding. Revo and Geek uninstallers give you the scanning option so that when you do the uninstaller for the application, it'll also find through the scan all the entries in the registry to remove for that application, as well as any leftover files the uninstaller left behind, taking up storage. Every time you boot your computer, you have to read every line of code in the registry before you can have the system up and running. The more stuff that's junk left in the registry, the slower your boot up startup process is. And the only way to clean that up and get an improvement is to, as you uninstall programs, scan for the registry entries and get rid of them. And same with your leftover files. Very few programs have I seen uninstall and leave nothing behind. Most of them at least leave a few registry entries and no files.
Okay, thank you. I think we beat that horse pretty good.
I hope so.
I hope so. I was trying to find this bit of info and circling back to that Windows side-by-side folder, and I found a sub article topic that mentioned the fact that that folder size can be skewed on how it's reported because part of that folder is links to other folders.
Yes.
So, and I don't know how, I just remember reading about that. There was a way to decipher or break out that information. but I can't find it at this moment.
That's why you have to examine it with the DISM command. It is an analyzer that will take the manifest and determine what is good and what is garbage.
Right, right.
And that's the only way to get it done. Individuals cannot begin to figure out what is garbage and what is not garbage in that folder.
Right. Any other, yes, Harry?
Just a quick observation that Tim points out, that this accumulation of garbage sometimes comes from the very simple act of wanting to try software out just to see what it does with the intent of getting rid of it. So I just want to remind folks that Drew taught us several months ago very carefully that the right way to do that is through Sandbox, so that when you close it, all of that is gone.
Right.
Another thing too, and I kind of forgot about it, in the disk cleanup utility, whichever one you use, if you have crashes on your system, it's creating crash dumps. And those can accumulate and really eat up a lot of storage if you get a lot of crashes on your system.
Okay. Any other last comments or questions for the meeting tonight? If not, I will stop our recording.